Cats, man. I'm Kayla Amanda, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. This is Demon in My View by Amelia Atwater-Rhodes. This book has the dubious honor of being the very first vampire book I ever read. I know it may not seem like it because you know I'm writing a book about shapeshifters, but vampires really are my one true paranormal love. I have been obsessed with them forever. My first episode of Buffy was in 1998 when I was just 10 years old. It was graduation part 2 when Angel feeds on Buffy, and I very distinctly remember being affected by that. Demon in My View is actually the second book in the Den of Shadows quartet, but I do distinctly remember that we read it first because when me and my frenemy found out that there was a first book, we had to rush out and find it. It was published when Amelia Atwater-Rhodes was only 16 years old in the year 2000. And not only was it the first vampire book that I read, but it was sort of my first inkling that I could turn my fascination for stories into something more, into maybe a career. For a few years there, until I also turned 16, I was convinced I was going to be an Amelia Atwater-Rhodes. I was also going to publish when I was like 14 and take the world by storm with my, well, Demon in My View ripoffs. So these books are out of print. It's been a little bit difficult to get my hands on In the Forest of the Night, but when I got my hands on Demon in My View, it felt pretty special. This week I want to go back and reread Demon in My View. I want to compare how it hits now to how I remember feeling about it when I was 12 years old. It's been 20 years. I'm 32 when I'm recording this, and I know that my standards will have... Can you stop? Oh my god! And I'm sure that it will not be as good to me now as it was when it was the very first vampire book I read. But I want to revisit it. I want to see what it is about that has... My cats are going absolutely crazy, I'm sorry. I want to see what it is about that book that drew me to it in the first place, and if there's anything in it that I have carried forward into my vampire fiction and vampire ideas as an adult. I have to go get my cats. Hello, same day, different shirt, coffee. I'm gonna read Demon in My View for a little while my roommate is out, and you will notice that I'm not in my bedroom, I am in my living room, which is distinctly not as goth as my bedroom because my roommate is normal. Jessica isn't your average teenager. Though nobody at her high school knows it, she's a published author. Jessica often wishes she felt as comfortable with her classmates as she does among the vampires and witches of her fiction. But 2 new students have just arrived at Ramsey High, and both want Jessica's attention. She has no patience with overly friendly Karen, but she's instantly drawn to handsome Alex, a self-assured, mysterious boy who seems surprisingly familiar. If Jessica didn't know better, she'd think Aubrey, the alluring villain from her novel, had just sprung to life. That's impossible, of course. Aubrey is a figment of her imagination. Or is he? Full warning for those who will be traumatized by that. I do really fuck up my paperbacks. I'm gonna crack the spine and I'm gonna dog-ear pages. But I have not opened it. I have not reminded myself of anything in it. So I'm gonna try to make a few predictions based on what I remember. There is a supernatural town near where Jessica lives called New Mayhem. And I believe that in New Mayhem, there is a bar where they have just unlabeled bottles behind the bar and you can help yourself, but some of them are like turpentine and blood, and some are water and vodka, and some are arsenic. I don't remember anything else about the plot. Like, obviously she's gonna get together with Aubrey, and I feel like Karen will probably be a nice witch who's trying to warn her away from Aubrey, or she will be like a super secret villain. We're about to get her first introduction. And because this is before Twilight, it looks like we're going to avoid the I have boring brown hair and boring brown eyes and no one would ever want me. Jessica well knew she had a body and face to die for. Get it? We love that confidence in a teenage girl. We're about to meet Aubrey. Or Alex, sorry, because Aubrey's fictional, of course, so he's just Alex, right? He's definitely not a hunky vampire. Just in case you were wondering if Alex/Aubrey is very cool, he is. He wears an upside down cross pendant with a viper spiraled around it because obviously. Coffee is becoming coffee. My cats are losing their minds, but I thought I would update you. I was totally right. New Mayhem is a vampire city near the city that Jessica lives in, and there is a nightclub in it called Las Noches. I don't know for sure about the bottles thing yet, but I'm betting that I'm right. Karen is in fact a vampire, and Aubrey / Alex has come to check out the author of Tiger Tiger. Also, I think it's interesting to note that Aubrey can like read people's minds and compel them to do things, but with Jessica, he can't do that. It's something that draws him to her, which, like, it's kind of the Twilight thing, right? This was written way before Twilight. I'm not saying that she stole it from Twilight. I'm also not saying Twilight stole it from her. I'm sure Stephanie Meyers has not read Demon in My View. I just think that it is interesting that both of these like teen vampire romances use the trope of like the guy who can read minds can't read mine. My coffee is coffeeing, and I'm using my vampire mug today. The writing is actually like a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I sort of thought that this was going to be a slog and it was going to feel very like it was written by a teenager. And to a certain degree, there is some melodrama that comes, I think, with being written by a teenager. But in general, it's actually like pretty good, and I haven't had any major quibbles with it. I'm not saying that it's like the next great American novel, but it's enjoyable and it's fun. And I totally get why, as a like 12, 13-year-old, I was very into this book. And I'm like certainly enjoying it now. There are some things in it that are just so like a product of its time, like late 90s, early 2000s, in the way that she behaves, Jessica. And it's a little uncomfortable seeing in Jessica so much that I have replicated in myself. She describes her bedroom at one point as having like all black sheets and pillows and a red lava lamp, and like I have black sheets and pillows and a red lava lamp in my bedroom now. So my coffee is done. As much as I would like to get back to Jessica and Aubrey, I think that I'm gonna go write for a little while because I'm trying to write every day. So I'm gonna get that knocked out of the way. I want to review another video that I have filmed, and then we can go back to Jessica and Aubrey. It's like 9:45 and I did not get around to going back to my book earlier today. I like putzed around on the internet and I wrote for a bit and I had a Zoom class, all that kind of stuff. So I just never got around to it, but I have some time now. I'm gonna go to bed. I'm gonna drink some sage tea and read my dramatic vampire book. Oh, there's lesbians in this. Fala had met and fallen in love with Moira and then changed the human woman to save her life. Despite Moira's weakness, she and her blood sister Fala were feared because of their reputation for being fond of causing pain. So like, blood sister sounds not horny, but it does say that Fala specifically fell in love with her, which is not that common for a 2000s novel for teens. I was right. So I remembered that there were unlabeled bottles behind the bar, and this says, Aubrey pulled one of the unlabeled bottles from under the bar. They're not exactly sure what it was he knew wouldn't harm him. He could down a liter of cyanide and not notice any effect. Some of these bottles held wine, others liquor, others blood that was always cold. How the bar was kept stocked was a mystery, as there was rarely a bartender working and the drinks were all free. It's dumb. It's dumb and I love it. It's the end of the day on day 2, and unfortunately I did not get to read as much as I would have liked. It was a crazy day at work and I was trying to fit some writing in around a bunch of errands that I had to run. But the day is over, my hair is up, my skincare is done, I have tea waiting for me. I can settle in with my book. Aubrey has a world serpent tattoo around his arm. It's a snake that bites its own tail. And this is my Ouroboros. It is, I don't know if you can see him, a snake that bites his own tail. And I used to want it as an armband, so like around my arm, like Aubrey has. Did I get this because I'm cool and original, or did I get this because Amelia Atwater-Rhodes planted the seed in my head when I was like 10 years old? In the lore, if you fight the change, like if you fight for your life when you become a vampire, you're stronger. So Aubrey can't turn Jessica because she wants to be a vampire. So she won't fight, so she won't be very strong, which means that other vampires can pick her off. Interesting lore. So what's the takeaway here? What did I learn from rereading this book that I first loved 20 years ago? Is it just that vampires are still my favorite? Because they are. But also, this book has a lot of the tropes that I like in my current fiction, that I first found when I was like 12 years old. They have a badass love interest, they have ass-kicking vampire hunting witches, they have a supernaturals only town while the rest of the world doesn't know that vampires are real. They have the is he gonna kiss you or kill you dynamic, which if you watched my Magic Stars close reading, you know I love. So it's interesting to see that like little baby larval human Kayla was already reading these tropes and was already drawn to them, and they're still the tropes that I find most compelling now. I totally get why over the last 20 years this is one of the few books that I have remembered and clung on to. It had all of the things that angsty tween me was looking for in terms of self-indulgent tropes in like vampire fiction, because I was already kind of a weird goth kid, but also as like an angry adopted kid who had some issues to work through. I really resonated with Jessica. I can still sort of see myself in her when I read it now as an adult. I also really admire Amelia Atwater-Rhodes' really concise plot. She sets up the central conflict, which is that Jessica unwittingly writes true stories about vampires and they're kind of unchill about it, and then delivers on it in a way that is both straightforward and compelling. I was expecting to have a lot more padding and sort of frivolous side quests, but I guess it's not really fair to judge her by how bad a writer I was. And yes, there's a queer black woman in it, and I know she's the antagonist and she kind of wants to kill Jessica, but if I'm honest, if some jumped up teenager was publishing all of my secrets for the world to read, I might be murderously unchill about it too. So I kind of fuck with Vala. It's also important to note that she's queer and black, and she and her girlfriend both, spoiler alert, survived the book, which doesn't seem that significant now, but you have to remember in its time, this was the early 2000s when we were throwing around "that's so gay" as a pretty commonplace insult. We had a Hillary Duff advertisement about it, and we used the F slur like it was no big deal. We weren't talking about diversity or representation in media at all the way that we are now, and it was very common to find all white casts making barely veiled homophobic jokes. If you rewatch Friends now, it can be pretty yikes. So the fact that you had this main character who was, yes, the antagonist, but she wasn't the antagonist because she was queer or because she was a person of color. Those things like never came up as anything other than random facts about her. They were no more significant than Aubrey's tattoos or Jessica's emerald green eyes. Yeah, she really has emerald green eyes. It was the year 2000, okay? Hi friends, it's Editing Kayla, and I just wanted to hop in and say how glad I am that Vala does not hit on Aubrey and Jessica. We have her established as having been in a romantic entanglement of some kind with both a man and a woman, and yet she never comes onto our leads. It's never sexual with them. And as a slutty evil bisexual myself, I'm really glad that in this case we ducked that trope. I think it was pretty common for paranormals at the time, specifically those written for adults. I'm thinking especially of Anita Blake, to have bisexual characters, particularly female bisexual characters, whose sexuality and promiscuity was inherently tied to their evilness and a part of what made them so monstrous to our leads. As a 12-year-old who already knew that she was bisexual, that was really good to see. I might not have had the words for it, but I knew that I was attracted to Angelus just as much as I was attracted to Faith. And being able to look at that as an adult and see that little tween me got to read something which didn't inherently demonize her is nice. In its time, Vala was, I think, pretty significant, and it's nice to see that in a book that I loved so much as a kid. I was kind of worried that I would have to go back and read this book and find some like problematic shit in it and then disavow it. So it is very relieving to find the opposite of that. So if you like YA paranormals and you can handle some edgy early 2000s goth girl snark, I think that you should pick this book up. It's really short, it's a fast read, and if you want to dip your toe into what vampire fiction was like before Twilight, or if you're like me and you want some nostalgia serotonin, I think it's really worth reading. The writing is clean, the world is pretty interesting, and Amelia Atwater-Rhodes does a good job of like dusting in history to make her vampires seem old and like they have a lived experience beyond their short little book. I had trouble finding it. I went through Amazon and it was kind of a nightmare, but there is a Kindle edition if you are not like me and you don't need to possess it as a physical nostalgia object, so I'll link that below. I will also link thrift books below. They have a few copies if you want to pick it up. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. taking this trip with me back to something from my childhood. Do you remember the first vampire book that you read? Was it Twilight? You can be honest with me, I also read Twilight, and I even liked the first book, so no shame in that. Do you have a book from your youth that you remember fondly and would like to revisit? Do you have books from your youth that you think were really formative for you? I would love to talk about that in the comments down below. If you like this video, please go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe, do all that good engagement shit. If you were looking for me anywhere else, I am pretty much everywhere as Kayla Amanda. That is Kaylughmanda, and I will see you next time.